I'm Brady Zach, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I will be discussing a movie that I watched for the first time very recently. I'd never really heard of it or seen anything about it, and it came out in 1979, almost half a century later. I think I'll put my 2 cents in. Disclaimer, this video will cover pretty heavy topics. We're in a war in this movie, if you don't know that. If that's going to make you uncomfortable, you should probably leave. For the rest of you, my only ask is that you watch the movie yourself before this video. I will be spoiling the whole plot, essential pieces to it, obviously. If you would rather not, or just came back from doing so, welcome. Let's get on with it. The film opens with a haunting monologue over depictions of a man drowning in PTSD. Recently, this man has returned from Vietnam. He agrees to a divorce with his wife, abandoning his child. Distraught, broken, an imposter wearing the face of the man who had left, never to come home. A deep whir slowly fades into shot, like a helicopter getting closer and closer, ready to take the man once more. Anticipation fills him. The only thing he has left is war, and it calls him back. He slowly goes to his window to see his coming fate, and instead he is met with the calm, unbothered nature of society. The sound cuts, and it can be easily defined as a simple fan blade. This drives him even deeper, into the bottle, into his own mind. He shatters a mirror, taking cuts to his hand, barely even caring. The pain, nothing more than another feeble attempt at escaping his own skull. Over these depictions, the man, named Captain Willard, foreshadows his own going back. Eventually, 2 men in uniform arrive at his door. Stepping into the room, they see him in disarray, naked, covered only by a bedsheet, blood smeared over said bedsheet, and the drunken stupor of which I'm sure they were familiar. They're here for him, exactly as he wanted them to be. He was needed in Vietnam once more. They get him cleaned up, and we are immediately pulled to a scene of the Willard exiting a chopper at his destination. It is here that both he and us will find out what he is here to do. Led to a small trailer where he meets 2 military officials and 1 assumed CIA operative. His mission and his target are made known to him. Terminate Colonel Walter E. Kurtz, a man whose methods and mind have been deemed unsound by all means necessary. Explaining that he has an army of indigenous Vietnamese people called Montagnards, and that they worship him like a god. After handing over their file as quickly as he had arrived, Willard joins a Navy River patrol boat, abbreviated as PBR, going up through the Nung River to Cambodia, headed to Kurt's last known position. The boat's crew greet Willard, and through him, us. Chef, a man who just wants to go home. Clean, a young guy who knows not of the horrors that await him. Chief, the leader of the boat, as well as a father figure to Clean, a man who wants nothing more than the safety of his crew. Finally, the most important character for our purposes, Lance B. Johnson, a famous surfer and a man who wants nothing less than to be in this war. They set off for a rendezvous with the 9th Air Cavalry, who are supposed to escort them to the mouth of the river. Upon arriving at the 9th's location, we are greeted with the heat of battle. A bombing run is currently active, a maelstrom of bullets. Helicopter blades cut through the sound around them. Through it all, a lone man shines. Doug Dale No. Lieutenant Colonel Bill Kilgore. Biggest hat in Vietnam. Funnily enough, as funny as his image actually is, it suits him to a T. Our first impression of him consists of 3 important things. He and Lance immediately hit it off, as Kilgore and his men love to surf, and they recognize him. In the middle of a war zone, they fawn over a famous surfer. He also doesn't know of Willard's mission, but immediately says that it will be done. The last important thing is a kind of culmination of the prior two. His confidence is simply unwavering. It's cartoonish. He is like a reincarnation of Nike herself to his soldiers. Quote, "You just knew he wasn't going to get so much of it as a scratch here." Quote, narrator Willard. He disapproved of the laissez-faire attitude the man has, but his love of Lance made him even more childlike in Willard's eyes, but, quote, he wasn't a bad officer, I guess. The morning brings with it likely the most memorable singular sequence of the entire movie. The ninth takes Willard and his crew to the mouth of the river, but the zone is, quote, hot. This isn't simple transportation. It becomes a coordinated air attack while Kilgore and his men blast Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries. Something that I'd like to point out is that in these scenes, Kilgore, while still leading, calling the shots, reacting to things around him, he screws around a lot. The music, the bravado, all coalesce around him to form this giant personality and give his men what they need to keep fighting. One line that I really want to call attention to is spoken by Kilgore directly to Willard after a napalm strike. The two men lock eyes and he says, "Someday this war is going to end." In the middle of all that, the PBR had been dropped in the mouth of the Nung River. This begins a pseudo-anthological storytelling that we will stay with until near the end of the movie. The first journey begins when they are temporarily stopped at a bank. Chef complains and hungers for mangoes. Eventually, this hunger leads him and Captain Willard into the jungle, deep into the jungle. The forest around them almost closing in on them. Willard hears something, both him and Chef ready their guns to investigate. Closer and closer, shots show us essentially nothing, but drum up the paranoia of what might, and then, bam, a tiger leaps from the trees. Both Willard and Chef fire rounds into the trees and bolt towards the boat. Leaping onto it, frantically the team beside them gets the PBR moving and fires blankly into the woods. Willard and Chef catch their breath until finally, through sort of fearful chuckling, Chef reveals this was not, in fact, VC, like the crew obviously thought it would be, but an animal. It's pretty clear here that Chef is breaking down mentally. The rest of the boat's reaction are obviously somber, made even more so by his own, but he is cracking for the whole crew to see. Throughout this and subsequent events, Lance and Chef begin smoking pot, among other drugs. This isn't exactly a major plot point throughout the movie, but the drug usage is A, obvious, and B, pretty important to us. Actions taken by Lance should be viewed through the lens that he is likely high, attempting to escape the constant bombardment of horrors that surrounds him. Continuing on the crew docks, we hit a U.S. supply depot. They dock at a U.S. supply depot. They collect fuel and cigarettes and various necessities. In the night, while they are at the depot, the USO, the United Service Organization, puts on a show for the soldiers. Hundreds packed like sardines in stadium benches, eager to see what has been brought. And what has been brought? What has been airlifted to the middle of the war, you might ask? 3 Playboy bunnies. To perform a raunchy dance to Susie Q for the men. This display puts the sex-starved soldiers into a frenzy, all rushing the stage, shouting their love for the bunnies. Willard walks off in a display of disdain for the supposed immaturity of his fellow soldier. Moving on from the supply depot, the crew slowly devolves into their own worlds. Willard is obsessed, constantly poring over the files of Kurtz, slowly eating up and relating himself to the journey that he reads. Chef and Lance are constantly under the effect of drugs, rapidly dissociating from reality. Lance paints his face in camo and wistfully wades beside the boat when he gets the chance. Down the river, Chief sees a civilian Vietnamese boat. Despite Willard's protesting about his objective, Chief opts to stop the vessel. and sends Chef to investigate. He is skittish due to his earlier experience with the tiger and his already clear spite at being in this war. After his many complaints and attempt to just look in the boat, he is convinced to hop on and check the cargo. Seeing nothing on a cursory glance, he tries to get back on the PBR, but Chief wants him to check further. Specifically, a rusted yellow can that a civilian woman on board is sitting on. Chef reluctantly steps forward to check it, and the woman reacts sharply, shifting to protect it. Spooking him, Chef shoots chaotically, killing all but the woman, who is left slowly dying from his maelstrom. Under this oh-so-important can is nothing more than a puppy. Lance takes a great liking to this puppy and takes it along, and Chief tells the crew that they will take the woman to a friendly hospital. Disagreeing with the plan that makes his mission take even longer, Willard shoots the woman, ending her life. A thick miasma of melancholy settles itself over the crew, who now irrevocably see Willard in a different light. Continuing, our group finds themselves at a chaotic scene, a bridge barely held by American forces, under constant siege, the last outpost before the Cambodian border. Lance, seeing the gunfire and arcing flares set against the backdrop of a pitch-black night, says it's beautiful, and admits to Chef that he was on acid. The boat, and specifically Willard, is approached by a man with a set of classified documents and a pouch of mail for the greater crew. Taking it, he and Lance step off the boat in search of a commanding officer. Wading through the devastation, they eventually arrive at a bunker named Beverly Hills, with a gunner firing blindly into an embankment that VC soldiers can be heard attempting to hold. The darkness shrouds them, and the gunner continues to fire chaotic shots until finally a resting soldier is called into the fight. Cold, calculating, he listens for the yelling, takes a single shot. With an explosion, the scene goes quiet. Willard asks if he knows the commanding officer, and he replies, yes, before walking off. They return to the boat with no more information than they had before. The next day, mail is distributed. Lance receives a letter from his family talking about their trip to Disneyland and how beautiful it was. He mutters to himself about the beauty of his own scene and begins tossing colored smoke bombs, creating his, quote, rainbow reality. Chef opens a letter from Eva, who I assume is his partner, and remarks, Eva can't picture me in Vietnam. Willard pores over the documents he obtained and won on the last man to attempt this hunt for Kurtz. The military had been saying the man was MIA for his family's sake, but in truth, they had assumed him dead. That was until they intercepted a letter he attempted to send home to his wife. It read simply, find someone else. Forget it. I'm never coming back. The echo to his own journey in obsessiveness is not lost on the apathetic captain. Clean listens to a heartfelt message from his mother. A hopeful air sets over him, and bam, they're ambushed. The men shoot back, eventually fending off the Viet Cong, but Clean was shot. Chef is called to administer aid as soon as the firefight is over, but he's already gone. The message from his mother still playing as the sorrowful backdrop for this young man's death. Chief holds him and cries. After some time has passed, the boat gets moving again, and eventually hits heavy fog. Chief powers through at first, but comes to the conclusion that he must stop, as his vision is almost completely lost. This causes a spat between him and Willard, who cites, "You're not authorized to stop this boat," despite Chief's protests of, "I ain't risking no more lives." The death of Cleen weighs heavy on him, and it seems obvious to say he wasn't looking for more blood. Within almost seconds of their squabbling, the boat is yet again ambushed, this time by primitive weapons, flinging arrows and spears chaotically in the men's direction. The crew fires back, blindly into the fog. Chief leaves the helm of the boat, firing erratically into the fog, even as Willard tries to argue that they're just arrows, primitive weapons meant to scare more than harm. In his mind, this is all just a message from Kurtz. But of course, he is obsessed. Chief is impaled by a spear. The last leg of the journey approaches the 3 remaining men, half the crew they once were. Willard attempts to go off by himself, away from the boat, away from Chef and Lance, and towards nothing but Kurtz. Chef argues that they'll go with him. They can all go together, as long as it's on the boat. Lance can be seen wading through the water with Chief's body. Quiet, peaceful, an impromptu burial, set in the river. The body drifts off, and the men head for their final destination. Approaching the camp, they are watched by the natives. An ancient temple appears, surrounded by Kurtz's followers, and set starkly against the backdrop of the forest. Bodies and severed heads can be seen strewn about across the shore and hung up in trees. As they approach a bank, they are approached by an American man. Not just an American man, but an eccentric photojournalist, covered in sashes and cameras and a large bag filled with films and lenses. He's hyperactive and even happy, a staunch contrast to the remaining crew. He leads Lance and Willard into the camp. Chef is left behind to carry out an airstrike on the place if they are not back by a certain time. Wading through the sea of natives, eventually Willard is dragged through the mud to a meeting with Kurtz, and Lance is just left oblivious, slowly walking around with the natives. Kurtz talks to Willard calmly, asking him things like where he's from, and moving on to bigger questions like about freedom, about what he is fundamentally. Then moving on, he tells him in this situation, he isn't an assassin, not a soldier. He's just an errand boy sent by grocery clerks to collect a bill. Quote Kurtz directly. We come back to the journalist getting water in a ladle and moving to a tiger cage that Willard is currently being held hostage in. The journalist preaches to him about the greatness of Kurtz, holding him up as some deity, and speaking of how he will be viewed after the war, not as a hero, but as an insane man. He says he can't fix this. There's no way that he can repair his reputation. But somehow, he believes that Willard can. Kurtz likes you, he says. Though this is to some degree obvious to the captain, as he knows that he wouldn't be alive if Kurtz didn't want him to be. Later on that night, we see Chef anxiously reaching the time mark that had been set, and starting to call in the airstrike, before we abruptly cut back to Willard. This time, with Kurtz standing before him. As he throws Chef's severed head into his lap. After this night, Willard is freed and roams around the campsite. As days go by, he listens to Kurtz speak. He sits with the photographer outside Kurtz's room, listening to a read of T.S. Eliot's The Hollow Men. Willard narrates over himself, looking at a table of Kurtz's belongings, pictures of his family, a Bible, fragments of the man he once was. He says, quote, "On the river, I thought that the minute I looked at him, I'd know what to do. but it didn't happen. End quote. An internal struggle between the soldier and the man rears its head once more. Kurtz tells a story of when he was still just a soldier. They had inoculated a bunch of kids with the polio vaccine. They left, and then a man came running, crying to them, but why, he couldn't say. They went back and saw a pile of little arms. Immediately distraught, Kurtz cried and wailed, but his mind shifted the paradigm in which he saw the world. He thought of the will to do that, the incredible resilience one must have. He says, quote, perfect, genuine, complete, crystalline, pure. I realized they were stronger than we because they could stand it. End quote. Coming to his own horrifying realization of something simple, like the beauty of the human spirit. A scene of Willard narrating again, speaking of his mission, asking himself if people back home would still want him to kill Kurtz. And of course he thought, now more than ever. But he also thought, quote, him most of all. I felt like he was up there waiting for me to take his pain away. He just wanted to go out like a soldier. End quote. Finally, we see two flip-flopping scenes. One of ritualistic animal sacrifice, which the natives and Lance participate in, mirroring Willard emerging from the river as if almost growing from it, entering the temple and slaughtering Kurtz. He exits the temple. Reading from Kurtz's manuscript, we see the line, drop the bomb, exterminate them all. The natives look up at him, revering him almost as their new god, possibly literally so. He simply takes Lance, gets in the PBR, and leaves. The ending scenes are of attempted contact through the radio, which Willard ignores and shuts off, and an echo of Kurtz's final words, the horror. The horror. With all that finally out of the way, I think the stage is set for us to move on to pure analysis. Two men, diametrically opposed, stand among the rest. And two men, standing at the feet of these giants, battle out their deity-like ideals within their own hearts and minds. The first of these two, or the first two, are Kilgore and Kurtz, the complete opposites of each other. Kilgore has this persona like the goddess of victory herself. He shows no fear in the face of abject horrors, for he knows there will be life after. He is the epitome of hope. Kurtz, on the other hand, is the pragmatist to end all pragmatists. He simply believes that the war must end by all means necessary. He too shows no fear in the face of abject horror, for he knows that is all there is. There is no going home. He is the epitome of despair. Starting off with Kilgore, we'll just begin with the fact that he is just kind of silly. In the middle of the war, the man is talking about surfing, fawning over Lance, due to him being some celebrity. He's so sure of victory even against subordinate backlash. For example, when we meet him, he was presented with a choice as to where he should land the PBR. And even against the contest, he chose an area that is, quote, hot, as said by another soldier, or in other words, the more hostile of the possible areas. The reason being that it had good waves. It had high peaks, I believe is what was exactly said. They literally just wanted to surf. The prospect of fighting is inevitable to him, sure, and that is something that he and Kurtz have in common. They both understand that they will not escape the war. The big difference, however, is that he also believes in the inevitability of winning. That is partially why his soldiers see him as Nike. He has so much overwhelming faith that they will come out the other side, that it is around him, it seems impossible to believe otherwise. I want to call another one of his qualities to attention, though, his irrationality, which I will talk more about later, but I most definitely want it to be in your mind. Sure, the man has faith that he will win, but his actual rationale for this is seemingly non-existent. His men rally behind him because of things like when he plays Ride of the Valkyries as they're leading a helicopter attack. This pretty obviously serves no purpose except for a morale boost, but in my opinion, that makes the most sense for his character. I think to a degree, he doesn't really believe in victory per se, or at least not as we may see it. The line, "someday this war is going to end," could be taken with his faith in victory in mind, or alternatively, and the reason I think it's so specifically pointed at Willard, is that after the war is over, whether or not they win, their own humanity must remain to some degree, or there will be no point in winning at all. The end of the war only matters if there are still people remaining to live in the world that was created. His philosophy is specifically faith in humanity, not faith in victory. We do simultaneously see him treat the opposition weirdly well when compared to his soldiers. Early in the movie, we see a scene of a seriously injured Viet Cong soldier begging for water, and the soldiers respond by wanting to give him patty water, which is essentially just, say, dirty water. Kilgore, however, having absolutely none of that, grabs a canteen and immediately begins to pour it in the mouth of the soldier. He cites the bravery in fighting for his country, giving respect even to his enemies. This scene also highlights his irrationality and the kind of laissez-faire attitude that it requires to create such a comically hopeful man as he. In the middle of giving the young man water, he's called by one of his men about the fact that Lance Johnson, a famous surfer, is here, and while listening, he starts to miss the man's mouth, basically just pouring water out on the ground, and then immediately giving up the canteen and going away to find Lance. His hopefulness is astounding. His love of humanity is noticeable, and yet he falls short of helping the man because he is, frankly, a little dumb. His brain is numb to reality so that he may be the epitome of hope. That brings us to his counterpart. Immediately, Kurtz's ideology is not only questioned by the military, in fact, not even just questioned, completely condemned. This makes sense. He is brutal and has been completely lost to the chain of command. His own mind lost completely to the war itself, no longer really a man, but the personification of despair. Similarly to Kilgore, Kurtz fully understands this war will end. Unlike Kilgore, however, who abandons part of his human intellect to save his human spirit, Kurtz gives up his humanity itself for the sake of unfettered logic. He is an ultimately efficient soldier who has seen the depths of what the opposition is willing to do and comes prepared to match it. Someday this war is going to end to him doesn't mean that one day he and his men get to come out the other side and go home. It means that they must end it themselves, for the only thing they are is soldiers. He reads The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot, which is an incredibly specific choice. Quote, "We are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men," end quote, is a line read aloud by Kurtz while being listened to. I take this to mean exactly what I've already said. Like a scarecrow who is necessary to scare off birds and things that might eat your crops, Kurtz believes he and his soldiers are the shadows of war, and the ones stuffed with nothing but guts, no soul remaining. Giving up their humanity gives them an advantage in a war that Kilgore can't even compare to. The horrors that he has seen constantly drive him into despair, something that he eventually cracks under, and sees the, quote, beauty in brutal efficiency. What he must become to win no longer really matters to him. His own soul provides the inefficiency of fear and hope. With so many terrible things that he sees, hope is crushed beneath the weight of his logic. Giving into nothing but thought, and especially thought about the constant horrific shit around him, he becomes the man we see in the movie. A shell of the man he once was, stuffed with the most efficient soldier one could be. To be the ultimate soldier, he finds rest and solace in pain, creating the personification of true despair. Finally, onto the two characters caught in this both literal and cosmic war, Willard and Lance. Throughout the movie, these two characters are opposed in their actions and reactions, but not to the degree that Kilgore and Kurtz are. Unlike the primordial thoughts given flesh, Willard and Lance are unapologetically people. Sure, they fall into very different sides of the spectrum. Both of them are very intertwined with one of the larger counterparts much more than the other, but they are not fully hopeful or despairing, not fully irrational or irrational, or rational. They show the very human battle between what could be, what is, and how you handle that. Their pain, fear, and hope is combined into the most human thing of all, uncertainty. Throughout the movie, as mentioned earlier, Lance does drugs. More and more throughout, we see him in situations that wouldn't make any sense to be calm or seeing the beauty of the world. This relates pretty closely with Kilgore, an entirely irrational but hopeful man, which is a big part of the reason that they are so intertwined. Lance, slowly but surely, sees each of the crew killed by various means, and sees more and more of the devastation of war. Earlier, I talked about a puppy, very briefly, that is found on the civilian boat that the crew stops. Well, Lance takes the puppy with the crew. This isn't super important, but it does show his inherent hopeful nature. In the middle of constant torture on his psyche, he finds solace in a dog. Eventually, he loses this puppy, and in the middle of a combat sequence, he is yelling about going back and searching for it. Of course, to some degree, that makes sense. It's a lost companion at a time when he's constantly seeing death around him. But it's simultaneously a logical nightmare that he suggests in the middle of combat. But it really goes to show how irrational one must be to keep hope up in such horrifying conditions. His drug usage and this dog, for a brief period, are things that pretty obviously make him a worse soldier. He's preoccupied and not in his right mind, but they keep him sane to a degree that Willard is unable to grasp. He's just doing the very human thing of trying to escape the world around him. Willard, on the other hand, is intertwined with Kurtz. Throughout the movie, we get glances of the file that he was given on Kurtz and his reaction to what it says he did. It's pretty obvious immediately that there is a sort of understanding between the two. Willard isn't just completely on his side, but as a soldier that feels unlike a human at the time, he gets the efficiency that Kurtz brings to the table. Slowly but surely, seeing the same horrors as Lance, the deaths of the crew, the chaotic battle at the bridge, he falls into the same trap that Kurtz himself did. They come to an understanding of the fact that the war must end, and their place in it is just that, in it, not living in the aftermath. He callously shoots a woman simply to further the mission, and at some point, his actions start to feel almost eager, as he needs to meet the man. He constantly debates on what he will do when he actually reaches him, but he never forgets that he must reach him. After he is given the mail package at the bridge, he reads the letter that the other soldier sent to kill Kurtz had sent his wife, which mirrors the alienation that Willard feels, as seen in the beginning of the movie with him leaving his own wife. In that moment, we really see how susceptible he actually is to this ideology of ending the war at all costs. We already knew that he was unstable in civilian society, but his slow fall to Kurtz's ideology really hammers in his own thoughts. Willard and Lance are not, however, the same person as their counterparts, as unlike them, they commit actions and have thoughts on the opposite side. Willard jumps and despairs at the head of Chef being thrown at him, showing a care for human life that seems absent in the current Kurtz. Lance, being shown the horrible scenes over and over and over again, has to resort to drugs, unlike Kilgore, who just seems to have some inhuman will to be hopeful. Ultimately, the two men cut off their counterparts. Willard kills Kurtz, and Lance leaves Kilgore behind, both going to the side of humanity itself rather than the perfect version of human ideals. These two characters really show the dilemma that the human mind is constantly in. Do you fall to fear, to despair? Do you hurt people to stop what you think is wrong? Do you run away? Do you face it with a brave face? They are the epitome of chaos, possibility, and the human spirit. For most of all, they are humans. Finally, to the end of the video, and I just want to say thank you so much for watching. This has been super, super fun to make. It took me a very long time, and To a degree, that was just because I lack some of the skills for things like this. But, you get better as you do things. Yeah, it's how things work. Specifically the summary portion, I'm not very good at it. I'm not great at just repeating what, kind of was shown, which is part of the reason it took so long to make. I really enjoyed the movie and writing analysis on the characters. I hope to get better at it over time and make a lot more videos like this one. I don't necessarily know that they'll be specifically film analysis. I would like to do some video game analysis, maybe some literature. I'm unsure. But again, I repeat, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.